Welcome, everybody, to today's Twitter Space. This is Will from Voltz Labs, and today we'll be discussing some of the highlights from the ETHCC conference with a particular focus on DeFi derivatives that are at the cutting edge of financial engineering and have massive potential for disruption. I'm excited to be joined by the Voltz Labs CEO, Simon, as well as Kamel, who is the CEO and co-founder of Contango, the Expirable Futures Protocol. And for those of you that are new to Voltz, Voltz Protocol is a non-custodial AMM for trading interest rate swaps with leverage. Both the Voltz and Contango teams gave presentations at ETHCC events, creating a lot of buzz around the future of DeFi derivatives. So let's dive in and let's hear from Simon and Kamel. Then we'll open it up to anyone who wants to come up and ask a question. And by the way, at any time, if either of you, my co-hosts here, want to jump in with a follow-up question, please do so. I want to use this as a time to kind of facilitate conversation between these two teams because there's so much exciting stuff happening in the space. So let's get this started. First off, Kamel, welcome. Can you give us a basic overview of what Contango is and the needs it aims to address in kind of the greater financial landscape?
Hey, thank you, Will. Thank you for inviting us on this space. So Contango is a derivative exchange, like offering expirable futures. So we all know perpetual futures. There are futures without an expiry date. Expirable futures have an expiry date. They are the main instrument traded in tradfi, where perps do not exist there. And in CeFi, you can find both perps and expirable futures. We are the first one to bring expirable futures by building them on fixed rate markets. And this is why we're here, because Voltz is offering interest rate swap in this segment. And maybe you want more info, or maybe we get there later.
Sure. Yeah, we'll definitely want to dive in more into the kind of work Contango is doing because it's really exciting. First, let's turn it over to Simon and just have him give us kind of a high-level summary of what Voltz Protocol is all about, and maybe touch on what a Voltz-powered future could look like.
Yeah, thanks, Will. And obviously, nice to talk again, Kamel. I guess for anybody that's new to Voltz, basically what we're building is an interest rate swap protocol. And for anybody who's not familiar with interest rate swaps, at the most macro level, what that enables you to do is it enables you to transition from something that is volatile to something that is stable. And obviously, volatility is something which is arguably synonymous with DeFi. But if we actually want DeFi to become the financial system for the whole of the world, that can't continue, which is ultimately why we decided to build an interest rate swap protocol. And what's really interesting is if you look at traditional finance, actually interest rate swaps is one of the biggest markets in the whole of the world. There's a number that I kind of regularly quote, which is cartoonishly large, where there's a quadrillion of notional traded in TradFi interest rate swaps each year. And it's that big because it's such an important part or important pillar, really, of that financial system. But what we are doing at Voltz, and what we will continue to do, is we want to bring that kind of really important pillar to DeFi, to help DeFi eventually become the financial system for the whole of the world. But alongside that, not only is it a really important kind of instrument in its own right, one of the things that's actually really kind of interesting with both the instrument but also the protocol that we've created is that it's extremely composable in nature. Which means that there are many different kind of use cases for that that other teams can pick up and kind of integrate into whatever it is that they're building, which is obviously in part, I think, some of the things we're going to touch on today. But actually, what we're also seeing is the community that's building around Voltz Protocol is actually like a really interesting community of builders who are all looking at the different ways in which they can integrate interest rate swaps into what they are doing.
Yeah, definitely. And we certainly want to touch on kind of how these different DeFi projects come together, how builders come and integrate these different tools into building really the future of finance. And Simon mentioned kind of bringing stability to markets, and Kamel, in your ETHCC talk, which was a great talk, I encourage anyone to check it out. You gave a great overview of the types of DeFi derivatives that can provide fixed rates, including interest rate swaps with Voltz and expirable futures with Contango. Maybe you can talk a little bit about why these instruments are so crucial to disrupting tradfi's grasp on global financial markets.
Yes, of course. So yeah, Simon mentioned that this is a massive industry in TradFi. So we're all builders in DeFi, and we strongly believe in the transparency and smart contracts and everything that comes with DeFi, right? Like, this is the first time that we can have a financial system that is completely open source, where everyone can check the transactions and there is no like hidden mechanism or anything, right? So fixed rate is definitely a building block of a financial system. If you are, especially in institutions or a company, and you want to have the ability to borrow, you may not be appealed by variable rates, right? And you need fixed rates. So I think we're strongly convinced that this is one of the domain that is going to have a massive uptrend in the coming years. We need fixed rates, and like, there are a lot of builders in the space. What is very interesting is that we are completely reinventing finance. We are not using the same tools as TradFi. In the talk that I've given at ETHCC, we have identified at least 4 different mechanisms for fixed rates to exist in DeFi. So for example, we have zero coupon bonds, where you have protocols such as Notional Finance or Yield Protocol. Then you have like yield stripping, where we have like Element Finance or APY. Then you have the interest rate swaps with Voltz. You also have like different flavors of perpetual futures with strips finance with the mechanism of perpetual interest rate swaps. Obviously, I can get into more detail in any of this vertical, but I'll let you drive the discussion.
Sure. Maybe this would be a good time for you to expand on why expirable futures are such a key element of kind of TradFi that haven't been realized much in DeFi yet.
Yes. So at the moment, we have a lot of, let's say, uncertainty in the market, right? We have variable rates, and we also have the concept of perpetual futures. What we need to understand with perpetual futures is that you have a funding fee which is charged or given to you, for example, each 8 hours. So if you have a position open for several weeks or several months, this funding fee could play against you, especially if you're hedging or if you're trying to do basic strategies such as cash and carry. It could be at your advantage, but you can also start bleeding money. What we have noticed with all the discussions with our trading partners and investors is that expirable futures is a needed instrument to bring stability and predictability to the markets. When you trade on an expirable futures compared to a perp, you know exactly how much you're gonna pay. This is the spread between the futures price and the spot. However, I want to make clear that we're not like a direct competitor to perps. What we offer is an alternative tool that brings predictability to the markets. And I think this is also what Voltz is doing. They're offering like the option to swap a fixed rate for a floating rate, or the opposite.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about kind of the ETHCC experience. I'll turn it over to Simon first. It seems like you came back from ETHCC more bullish than ever about the potential of Voltz and really of DeFi at large. Can you share some of your highlights from the conference and what your main takeaways were?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a few weeks ago now, but we definitely came back pretty bullish about the whole sector in general. I mean, beyond the fact that there was I think is a really well organized conference, one of the better ones that I've been to recently. But I think probably at the highest level, there are three main takeaways for me, and I think the first one really is that there isn't really a bear market from a builder's perspective. In fact, if anything, there were kind of more kind of like hardcore builders and founders at the conference, and probably ETH Amsterdam aside, which is obviously a hackathon. Aside from that, is that there were more kind of builders and founders than I've seen at other conferences. And within that, it's not just the number; it's actually the quality of teams. Even speaking to the likes of Contango, whilst we're there, there's various other kind of teams that we spoke to as well. I think there's kind of like continued inflow of really smart people in this space, which frankly is nothing but bullish for like the future of the whole sector. Then alongside that, I think one of the other things that really stood out is the fact that now is actually a really good time for people to be building. When you're in a bull market, there is so much additional noise that I think at times makes it actually quite difficult to kind of be able to see through that noise and to understand whether or not what you're building is providing fundamental long-term utility. But if you're building in a bear market like we're in right now, like actually all of that noise is stripped away, which means that you're able to identify a lot more clearly that what you are building is actually creating kind of long-term value. And then the third, which is a bit of a funny one, just because it was around VCs, and VCs kind of generally for like the market, I guess in some ways perceived in a bad light. But one thing that did stand out for me whilst I was there is, despite the fact that we're in a bear market, there's a huge amount of venture capital that's still floating around with lots of people looking for good quality teams to back. And if you think of those three things combined, right, like kind of more builders, very good time to build, arguably the best time to build, plus a lot of money that's looking to back builders, you put those three together, and actually it's nothing but bullish for the future of the whole space. And that was ultimately why I came back feeling more bullish than before I went away.
I know you were bullish before, but now it just to a whole new level. That's great. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure even for the VCs there, they know that people are showing up during bear market times are real builders. So it's
exactly. This is a great point as well, because and when you think about the fact that all the protocols are composable in many ways, or often composable with each other, you know that the other teams that you're building with are like hardcore glass eaters, wanting to work through a bear market and are here for the right reasons. So actually, kind of all of that combined is actually it's just a great time to be building.
Awesome. And Kamel, I think you mentioned in your talk, I don't know if you said it was your first conference or your first time presenting at one, but I'd love to hear more about kind of what your main takeaways were about kind of the DeFi landscape and where we're headed.
Indeed, that was the first time that I was a speaker at a conference. I've done several conferences in the past, mainly in Lisboa. I think what really struck me in Paris is the community, right? Like it's always so interesting to meet different people with different backgrounds being like all together, and you can definitely like feel the good vibes about like building this new paradigm together, right? Like of course there were like talks around derivatives, but you feel that you're part of a much bigger movement. And we had like so much diversity. There were so many talks. It was like even hard to pick up like talks at the same time. And on top of builders, which is like definitely the most important aspect when I was in Paris, we had like so many interaction with like press, VCs, and even like people just starting in DeFi. And I think we managed to attract a lot of talent in the space. I've also been to the hackathon. There was like a lot of willingness to create something new and to improve our system. So that's definitely a very positive experience. I'm looking forward to to having like other conferences and to keep building.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm sure these conferences are kind of a great way to check in with people that are have been observing your respective projects for a while. So, I mean, Simon, what kind of feedback did you get about Voltz Protocol and the kind of progress that has taken place so far this year?
Yeah, I mean, conferences are often nice for that type of thing, just to get a bit of a step back, meet some other founders, kind of check in on how everyone's been progressing since you all last saw each other last conference. I mean, I don't want to just spend this time shilling Voltz, but one of the things that really stood out, and this is kind of reflected in the numbers, it is actually the protocol at the moment. The protocol of the community is all growing really nicely. So I think we're 8 or 9 weeks post launch, and we've got around 130 million of notional liquidity and around 20 million of notional trading, which, particularly given the market, is actually extremely good. And actually, within that, I just wanted to pick up on something which Kamel mentioned earlier around kind of like different fixed rate protocols. I mean, we don't consider ourselves a fixed rate protocol at all. In fact, it's a very small kind of, in the grand scheme of things, for an interest rate swap, it's a very small use case, which is to lock in a fixed rate of yield. Actually, the vast majority of the use cases exist around kind of both risk management and actually using the instrument as a way of kind of constructing a whole bunch of new and different products, whether that be products for retail or whether that be kind of structured products for corporates, or even kind of option products like the guys at Contango are building. And I think that the fact that the protocol, the use cases for an interest rate swap are so wide, and the protocol is generalizable in nature, such that we can create markets on kind of be it STETH, RETH, but then alongside that also kind of markets on Avi and Compound kind of stablecoin yields. Alongside, actually, frankly, because it's both generalizable and it's synthetic, we can create markets on top of basically anything with a variable rate of return. And that's like, obviously those kind of other markets kind of that we could create aren't live yet. So they're not reflected in numbers. It's obviously impossible for that to be the case. But the fact that the use cases are so wide is driving like the numbers that we're seeing.
Very cool, cool. And yeah, if you have any follow-ups, please feel free to ask them. Otherwise, I want to talk a little bit about integrations, actually. So conferences like ETHCC are a great way, like we mentioned, for projects to connect with each other and kind of put a name in the face to the profile pictures we see. From the Voltz team, it was awesome to hear about all the other teams working on cutting edge protocols, and in particular, our head of BD, Nick, spoke highly of Contango, and as well Simon did as well. And he suggested we invite them on today. So I want to talk about how these different kind of DeFi Lego pieces can fit together. We mentioned how sort of the fixed rate of returns is just one piece of Voltz, but it's kind of an important piece, as Kamel mentioned, to the overall ecosystem. So maybe I'll stick with Simon for a second just to explain kind of the importance of integrations for composable pieces of DeFi tech like Voltz. How do all these different pieces fit together to provide a challenge, a way of disrupting these tradfi markets and becoming the global financial system of the world?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not really a new thing in many ways, but it's nice to just always reiterate, which is that kind of the market that's been created in DeFi, or the ecosystem that's been created in DeFi, one of the massive superpowers of being kind of open source permissionless protocols is that it unlocks composability. And I think it's Chris Dixon actually that talks about the fact that composability of software is like compounding for finance. It's kind of like it's just a real superpower where you can take these different primitives that might exist, and off the back of both them being open source and composable in nature, means that you can layer different Lego blocks together to effectively create new products off the back of it. And that ability to always be able to pick up something that has been created and integrate that into what you're building, it actually compounds growth of the whole sector, which when you really zoom out and think about DeFi versus tradfi and how that's going to play out long term, well, tradfi is like almost the direct opposite. It's all closed source, it's not transparent, it's deliberately opaque in nature. And the reverse being that DeFi is open source, it's transparent, it's composable. That those kind of underlying kind of like, I'm trying to think of the right word, kind of dimensions of the ecosystem just act as like kind of one of the kind of core kind of opportunities for compounding of growth, such that DeFi can displace traditional finance.
Yeah, fantastic. And Kamel, I know you have a kind of a great bird's eye view of these different projects. So I'm curious if how you see the importance of integrations, both as Contango specifically and kind of as an ecosystem-wide ethos, and maybe that could expand onto any potential integrations you might see between these platforms, perhaps even between Voltz and Contango.
Yeah, composability is definitely like a pillar of DeFi. It's truly amazing. So like we're able to offer expirable futures by building on top of fixed rate markets. So for example, like Voltz or notional or yields. And what is amazing is like we also offer our positions as NFT, which allows then new builders to build on top of Contango. So you can think about like cash and carry votes, and then these votes can be integrated in other strategies, right? And then you could have another protocol building on top of a cash and carry vote. And then this composability makes it way simpler for a retail investor to be onboarded in DeFi, because they could simply come and put their money in their vaults and get a return on it without having to go into the depths of the infrastructures. Because like at the end, like Voltz or even Contango is a new primitive. We're building like the base layer for our new financial system. So yeah, composability is definitely an amazing feature.
Right, and I'm curious to kind of stick on this point for a while. Like, what is, maybe we can just kind of think out loud together. What is, since we are kind of base layer building block DeFi primitives, I wonder what are some of the best ways that we can find other projects to build with, to integrate with them? I know this is kind of a question that we're all asking. We're all working on ways to attract more builders to our projects and to connect with other builders and to have more integrations. Any ideas on how we can sort of better as an industry, like connect with other projects? I'll open that up to either of you. And anyone else, by the way, that wants to jump on stage, just raise your hand.
Well, I think the fact that DeFi is open source and permissionless in nature just provides opportunity really for for anybody to really jump into the ecosystem and start building. So just at the most macro level, as a sector, like it's kind of relatively easy to onboard new builders that want to be involved in the space. I think the next step is then really, when you're thinking about it like a protocol layer, it's like how can you help people understand the benefits of the protocol, the way in which the protocol works, like the ideas and products that could be built off the back of it. And that, I don't know, speaking from a Voltz perspective, that happens in various different forms. But like whether it be hackathons, whether it be people in the community, like what we do is when teams come through, and there's quite a few of them, they might reach out either directly on Discord or via DMs. Like we typically then set up either Telegram chats or kind of one-on-one channels in the Discord with these teams and really help them kind of get through any questions that they might have in order to help them get up and live. And actually one of the things that we do quite a lot there is we speak to teams even further up the funnel, so to speak, in terms of like from their perspective, they're still in the ideation stage, and we actually often spend times ideating with them to help them come up with a good idea which they want to commit time to, and then ultimately try and help them get live. But Kamel, I don't know what it is I don't know really the way that you think about it from your side.
Yes, so before jumping on how we attract a new wave of builders on top of our protocol, I think it's super interesting that you mentioned that we are open source protocols, right? Like I remember when I was doing like my master in financial engineering and I had to do my thesis, it took me months to find the right data and to have access to the API, and I had to pay for it. Whereas like our new system is completely open. So if you're a builder, it's true. You can come and you have access to the GitHub and you can start integrating immediately. You can play with it. You're free. You're immediately free. And like we really have to celebrate this feature of DeFi, because in TradFi it's so hard. It's so hard for anyone to build, and you don't have this composability. And like especially I'm thinking about like atomic transaction, for example, in DeFi, which is very central to Contango. So to jump back on how we attract new builders, I think like there are three main ways for us. One is definitely doing like more conferences and hackathons, and start to sponsor hackathons to have people building on top of Contango. Another one is what we're doing right now, right? Like we were doing like AMA on Twitter. We like promote the protocol on the press, on our own like Twitter, LinkedIn, Medium, and this is definitely working. Like we often have people reaching us out after this kind of events. Another interesting fact is to be proactive. Like for example, there's a new wave of structured products. I'm thinking, for example, about Ribbon, who builds like option strategies on top of Open. They got super successful, and there are a lot of different protocols like that. So what we're spending a lot of time doing is to try to map who are the new protocols coming and creating like structured products or anything like related to derivative, and reach out to them directly, being through our network of co-founders or our network of VCs, or directly on Discord or Twitter.
Yeah, certainly lots of really great points there. And at these early stages, you know, it really is about one builder at a time, one project at a time, just doing all the outreach that we can. So those are some great points. At this time, I know we started a little bit late, so if everyone wants to go slightly over, we were slated to have this talk be 45 minutes. So we have about 10 minutes left in our scheduled time. But so at this time, I'd like to invite anyone else who wants to ask a question to raise your hand. And I'd also, I think the two of you might have some questions you want to ask each other about each other's respective projects. So please, if you have anything, go ahead. Otherwise, I can ask some follow-ups.
Well, I think one of the questions which I don't know the answer to, but it also didn't come out, is like how you guys are progressing, like where you're at. I know when we last spoke before we were in Paris, you're kind of in the middle of your round, and then obviously loads of progress happened between then and Paris. So I think it'd just be nice to hear a general update.
Yes, thanks for
if you're
asking.
happy to share it.
No, yeah, we do like so. We're still working around the clock to release a first beta version. So we still scheduled this for this summer. This is going to be a first integration with Yield protocol on layer 2 Arbitrum. We have already been through a first audit. We are going to have a second audit this month. And when we're happy with the beta version and we got the two audits completed, we will launch into layer 1 and layer 2 on Yield protocol. Obviously, we're very active on integrating more protocols. So next we have certainly notional finance. As you know, we're actively discussing with you guys to Voltz. We're also talking with Element Finance. We're trying to see how to increase the liquidity. The goal is very clear. We want to be the best source of liquidity for Expirable Futures, but not only in DeFi, but DeFi and CeFi, because as you mentioned, fixed rate markets are massive, and we strongly believe that having liquidity of Expirable Futures directly on fixed rate is going to be a killer feature. It's going to overpass the liquidity of Expirable Futures in CeFi. So yeah, that's our roadmap at the moment. We're really excited about it. So yeah, on
Nice.
Voltz, it's quite amazing. We really like so specific features. For example, you're highly capital efficient. I think you're the first protocol bringing interest rate swap. So yeah, maybe a question for you is, what kind of other protocols are chatting with you to Voltz, and what kind of products they are going to offer?
Yeah, nice. Well, look, I mean, obviously, I'm super excited to see you guys go live. This is a good question. That there's a real wide spectrum actually, and in many ways that's because we've created a new market in DeFi for the first time. So that kind of varies in terms of complexity. There's some stuff which is kind of one end of the spectrum, like creating fixed rate vaults, and obviously fixed rates exist in other places. But it's more the composable nature and the fact that Voltz Protocol is extremely capital efficient that attracts people there. But then across the kind of going further down the complexity spectrum, there's a whole range of things. We've got two teams at the moment who are kind of looking at ways to integrate Voltz as a form of stablecoin collateralization, which is obviously pretty TTNE and pretty interesting. But then alongside that, there's some more quantitative type applications, like building swap options back of kind of rates or interest rate swap markets existing in DeFi, through to things like what your guys are doing, where you're building option protocols. So there's really a wide spectrum, which I think is pretty nice. It's kind of what we expected, and what we're doing is we're just helping teams kind of work through that ideation to the point that they can get live.
Really interesting.
Yeah, and it seems important to both these projects. Like both these projects have a mission of really disrupting these tradfi, kind of the stranglehold that tradfi has on a lot of these markets. But another element of that seems to be kind of winning over tradfi investors. So I'd like to ask both of you about kind of the strategy for attracting these tradfi investors who maybe haven't even gotten into DeFi before, but perhaps they're familiar with the but they haven't seen it applied in DeFi. Would be maybe your main way of trying to entice these type of folks? And maybe I'll turn it over to Kamel first, and then we can hear from Simon.
Sure. So in TradFi, it's a different landscape for to attract them in DeFi, right? I think the main blocker for them is still the regulation. Obviously, when we touch this kind of product, especially derivatives, there is a lot of a lot of news and a lot of movement and a lot of restrictions, especially in the US. So stuff like DYDX, they have to geo-block US people to invest. BitMEX got into a lot of troubles because they offer derivatives. So obviously, we advocate in this direction, but this is more industry-wise problem. So we hope if we get more clarity around regulation. There are some very interesting initiatives, for example, Aave and Arc, to try to create new pools where you have some KYC for institutions. But like the main feedback that we get from them at the moment is around regulation. So we really need to be strong together and to advocate for DeFi and better rules for everyone.
Yeah, that's a great point. Simon, you have any notes to add on?
Well, I think that, like just go back to the most macro point, which is the long-term objective for DeFi is ultimately to displace traditional finance. And I know we touched on some of this before, but like the reasons why we want to see that happen is because what's being built in DeFi is, as a system, it is more transparent, it's more innovative, it's more equitable, it's more accessible, it's permissionless in design. There's many attributes where it's kind of demonstrably better than what exists today in traditional finance. So we want to see this stuff get built, and we ultimately want to see this displacement of TradFi take place. Like from a Voltz perspective, like kind of how that plays out for Voltz Protocol and interest rate swaps. Like obviously we're kind of building the protocol out kind of for DeFi kind of markets. Like today, I'm trying to think of DeFi like I'm trying to think of the right language, but we're building out the markets in DeFi today. But because the protocol is synthetic in design, there's nothing stopping like the DAO from launching kind of tradfi rates on chain at some point in the future. And like what would be really interesting when that starts to take place, assuming it does at some point, is that you suddenly start to have this bridge across both DeFi and traditional finance, where these two markets are actually coming together in some way. And that what we expect to start happening at the point where something like that would take place is you start to see kind of more participants coming into the sector who have perhaps predominantly traditional finance before that point in time. And these two worlds actually start to kind of collide in many ways in a pretty interesting way. And then how that kind of looks long term for kind of Voltz is that ultimately I think there's an opportunity for any form of decentralized exchange to displace centralized exchanges. And again, I don't want to keep going back to these reasons, but there's a long list of reasons for them. Even if you don't believe in the stuff around it being more transparent, more all this type of stuff. Even if you just look at it from a pure business model perspective, actually a centralized exchange, it has to employ thousands of people, depending how big the exchange is. But typically, the big exchanges have to employ thousands of people in order to maintain an efficient market. But if you look at that from a smart contract perspective, actually, a smart contract, it doesn't employ anybody. It's a smart contract just operates by itself. And what that means for the participants on the market is in a centralized kind of exchange, the exchange has to extract rent in the form of fees in order to pay the salaries of the people it has to employ in order to create the market. But if a market is just purely built off smart contracts, that even though there may be some sort of fee parameter that might get switched on, the fees don't need to be anywhere near as large as they are for a centralized exchange, because there's not this like massive operational expense of paying thousands of people to maintain it. So even if you just look at it from that perspective, certainly what I expect to see take place in the future is I expect the vast majority of centralized exchanges to be displaced by smart contract based exchanges. And what we want that to look like is we want that to be a world which is kind of like DeFi based rather than TradFi adopting smart contracts.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kamel, I'm sure you resonate with a lot of that. That's a lot of like the ethos of DeFi at large is kind of in that decentralization. Obviously, we've seen a lot of the downsides of centralized exchange, of course, in recent months. I mean, I would love to keep down this line of questioning if you guys can stay on a little while. I'm curious to hear your notes from both of you. We'll start with Kamel, just about kind of the power of being synthetic and being decentralized. I mean, where do you see this going? And maybe you have some reflections on what Simon said as well.
Yeah, decentralized is definitely an extremely powerful feature. Like, the fact that we can have different members from all around the world taking part of a project and making suggestions and approving like new rules on your own product and make like this product collaborative and open to everyone is definitely something we were really interested in. This is also something differentiated from CeFi and TradFi. This is like at the heart of the movement. And it's so interesting that DeFi is leading Web3 in this direction, right? Like, so Web3 is a very wide concept. We think like this is here to stay, and it's not only about DeFi. Like DAOs and decentralization is like a new paradigm in how we get organized and how we make decisions together, and how also we split profits between the different members of our community. So for us, it's really amazing to see the interest that we get from people all around to talk about advanced topics. We're trying to give access to the complexity of derivative to the world. Like we try to put a lot of attention to our docs to make them as simple and as detailed as possible to empower the decentralization, because the more people we onboard in our community and the more decentralized we become. And yeah, I think it's truly fascinating, this like DAO concept and decentralization.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, this is such an exciting industry to be a part of, and it's great to hear that even despite market fluctuations, I mean, that's neither here nor there. Like we don't even care about the news around crypto markets generally. Like we're here building, and we see some incredible opportunities in this space. And hearing from you both has been, I mean, really inspiring. I would love to dive deeper into the complexities. Maybe we can have on another call, have it be more kind of developer engineer focused. For now, though, this has been a great talk just on integrations, on kind of the future of DeFi, on how these different primitives and financial derivatives can come together, and how the teams can build together. I think we, as you mentioned, Kamel, like having good docs, making it as accessible as possible for builders to find these projects and to contribute is a huge topic, and one that we are constantly trying to work to improve. So I hope we can kind of come together often as projects and have a meeting of the minds on how to attract builders to this space, because I'm sure anyone who reads into either of these projects will get excited for the potential that they represent. And so I know we're kind of nearing the end of our time. If either of you have any other points you'd like to make or questions you'd like to ask, now is a good time. Otherwise, tell us about how people can learn more about your protocol and whether you're looking for any specific types of builders or traders to collaborate with. So, Simon, why don't you go first with your call to action?
Sure. Well, the only other point that I'd say is obviously super nice to be on the space with you, Kamel. Like, honestly, really excited to see you guys go live. Like in terms of people that want to know more about Voltz, obviously you can follow us on Twitter. You can come into the Discord. We're all pretty active there. Kind of like if you want to, and you're kind of thinking about some new ideas, and perhaps you don't want to share them actively in the Discord, you can DM us. We're pretty responsive around kind of a lot of that type of stuff. And then other than that, just if you want to trade or pick up the protocol and use it to hedge risk, whatever it might be that you want to use it for, you can access the app from the website, which is obviously incredibly designed by Broccoli, who I can see sat here listening to the call.
Shout out to Broccoli for sure. And if you're listening to this, you're on the cutting edge of DeFi here. So I mean, learn more about these projects, and you're really do yourself a service, no matter where you're at in your kind of crypto journey, whether you're just getting into it, you're just a trader, or whether you're a seasoned developer. So, Kamel, let's hear from you on how people can learn more about Contango.
So you can go on contango.exchange. That's the main website. There you will find the link to go to our docs or Twitter. You can learn a lot there. And this is also a call for builders. We're chatting with a lot of investors. We can say there is a real appetite for cash and carry. This is an arbitrage strategy that we make possible in DeFi by offering expirable futures, especially cash and carry and leverage. We can say for sure that there is an appetite from trading houses to have these kind of strategies. They are doing it in-house. But if you are willing to build and to offer that to the world, I think Contango is a good place to start. If you also want to offer, for example, on ETH2, a way for people to get the reward in ETH and to be hedged against the price fluctuation on ETH, you can create also this kind of vault with Contango. We have a lot of information in our docs, and obviously don't hesitate to get in touch with us either on Twitter or Discord.
Fantastic. Well, it was really great having you both on. Thank you for taking the time. And super bullish about these types of primitives. Fascinating stuff, and look forward to chatting more in the future.
That was really great, Simon. Will, thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thanks, Kamel. Thanks, Will.
Yeah. Thank you both. All right,
Cheers,
everybody. Take care and look out for this recording. Bye-bye.
Cheers.